She stuffed my shirts into trash bags and left them on the wet porch. "Dad, we're moving in today. Leave the keys." I kept mine. The rain came early, heavy stripes pulled down from a flat gray sky. Water ran off the steps in thin ropes and pooled at the curb. The bags shivered when the wind pushed them, plastic rasping against stone. My house key sat cold in my palm, not taking any warmth. The lock was new fresh brass, bright as a coin. A smear of gray putty clung to the screws. Somebody worked fast this morning. Patrick's cousin runs a handyman crew. The putty smear on the screws looked like his hurry. I tried the key, slow, the way you do when you think patience might change a thing. It didn't. Inside, I knew how the morning should have been. Kettle up, a thin whistle, mint leaves crushed between thumb and forefinger so the smell lifts easy. The coffee lid knocking lightly while it warms. That is how a day starts when a house still knows your hands. Today, the sounds were out here. A mother across the street called, "Careful!" and slammed her trunk. Two kids sprinted through a puddle, shoes slapping water, laughing like laughter could keep you dry. Down Maple Street, a mail flap snapped shut. The carrier whistled once and moved on. The world had its errands. I had trash bags. Steps quick and neat moved behind my door. Her voice came through in a clean line. "Dad, this makes sense. Mike's gone. You told us to find our own place. We decided here." Behind her, a man's voice, low and eager. "I've got the dolly. Patrick." I pictured him with a ball cap turned backward, shoulders already inside my hallway. Mike's gone. True in the way a calendar is true. Last night, from a hotel room in another country, he sent me a small picture white sheet. A nightstand. A city I didn't recognize, smeared on the window. I wrote back, "Be careful." He sent a thumbs up and a little plane. He wasn't part of this. I looked at the bags. It isn't the weight that stings. Plastic weighs next to nothing. It's the sound. That scrape of plastic across wet stone is the sound of a person being moved without being spoken to. One of my checked shirts stuck out at the neck, taking the rain. I pressed it back in. On the edge of the garden, basil went dark under beads of water. The leaves held the drops like marbles. I lifted my phone and took a picture the way I always do, small things saved while big things break. The lock clicked inside, someone testing it from the other side. "Mr. Reed paused with his trash can halfway down his drive when her words carried clear through the door. "We're moving in today, Dad." He looked at me, then away. The polite kind of looking away people do when they see something they can't fix. "Leave the keys on the mat and don't make a scene," she added. Lighter now, like giving a delivery driver instructions. I don't like scenes. Noise is quick. Paper is slow and stays. I pressed my thumb under the porch rail and lifted a curl of algae green ribbon peeling from wet wood. The porch light above me had a dead gnat caught under the lens. I had never noticed that. Her perfume leaked through the frame, sweet and high, and then the rain washed it and I could breathe. A cruiser rolled past, wipers ticking. Click, click, click. It didn't stop. I bent, tied off the tops of the bags that had my name written on them, carried them to the driveway. The plastic squealed. At the curb, I stopped. The basil leaves shook. The rain found my collar. I took one more picture, just the porch, the new lock shining, the doormat that said welcome in letters rubbed thin. Then I put the phone away and walked toward the shop. Under the big maple, I scrolled to a name that still answered on the first ring. "Bill," I said, "remember my place on Maple? I need a week." "How quick is quick?" he asked, voice low, half amused. "Cashier's check for earnest money tomorrow. Keys today after lunch." A beat. He cleared his throat like the old smoker he is. "Send me the address again. I'll call the title office." I slipped the phone back. The rain thinned. Two leaves floated side by side in the gutter until one spun loose and shot ahead. I watched them go and kept walking. At the shop door, my old blue key turned without fuss. The smell came up to meet me the way a dog used to do: oil, pine dust, glue, the iron tang of old nails. I set the bags by the bench, took the kettle down, set it on the little stove. The burner ticked, caught, and the flame took. I rinsed a coffee mug and held it to my face. Dish soap and smoke. The rain tapped the tin roof, slow and even, like a clock you can hear. Her call lit my pocket. I let it go to voicemail. The kettle began its thin, crawling whistle, and I let it climb. I pulled the blue folder from the drawer under the bench. The plastic sleeve warmed under my hand. Title: Deed. Names in plain black letters that don't argue. I slid the folder back, poured hot water over grounds, and sat on the cot to watch the steam rise. The shop light hummed. Outside, a delivery truck backed up, beeping in short, careful notes. I lifted the mug and took a slow sip. Coffee tasted like coffee should, when you drink it somewhere you built yourself. Title office? Downtown? I asked when the woman picked up. Come by, she said. We'll start a file. I set the phone face down so it wouldn't light the room. The bag sagged and sighed. Okay, I said to no one. Okay. I didn't go back to the porch. I let the rain take what it wanted and kept what I needed. The shop knew my steps, even when I tried to walk quiet. I cracked the window over the sink and let damp air mix with glue. It was a clean, damp, wet wood, hot dust cooling, the tail of coffee. Street light slid along the hand planes like water. On the wall, the photo of Linda was still crooked. The tape had dried at one corner last spring. I pressed it back with a thumb and told myself again I'd frame it proper. She smiled the way she did when I came in with dirt on my knees, as if work on your knees still counts. I made the cot with the army blanket that always smells faintly of steel. When I pulled it tight, my knuckles went white the way they do on a steering wheel in a hard rain. I set the blue folder at my feet like a book you can't lose. I don't read much anymore. Phone calls are enough. I laid my wallet on the bench license, slid halfway out, ready. Bill said he'd bring a cashier's check for the earnest money. I wrote what mattered on a small sticky note, transfer today, and stuck it to the folder like a grocery list. Her message came thin and bright. Dad, this is happening today. Mike is overseas. It's the perfect time to move. Please don't make this ugly. We'll bring the truck around 5. I held the phone to my shirt until it went quiet. The rain let up. From the alley a dog barked twice and then only breathed. A car door thumped hollow and was done. I rinsed the mug and set it upside down. Turned off the stove, let the burner tick itself cool. I took the day's work from the rack oak rails for a man who still wanted wood to feel like wood. The boards were wide, the grain straight, the edges proud and true. When my palm ran the first rail, it gave back a low song you feel in your bones. Some things answer when you touch them. I wrapped the rails in a moving blanket, taped the corners, wrote Parker Rails in thick black letters so I wouldn't forget my own name. The tape squeaked and stuck. I slid the bundle into the bed of the truck and tied it down with the short ratchet strap that always pinches me if I'm careless. It pinched. I swore under my breath and smiled at myself. I locked the shop and drove slow, wipers doing their small seesaw. Out past the high school, the road opened and the air got clearer. At the customer's porch, it smelled like onions and butter. He signed the receipt on my hood and gripped my hand with both of his, the way some men in Missouri still do when they mean it. Appreciate you being on time in this weather, he said. You're welcome, I said and meant it. My breath came easier on the way back. By the time I parked in the alley, it was a shallow brown river. The neon beer sign at the corner bar stuttered. Somebody inside cheered at a game. I slid off my boots, loaded the cot, and lay back. The floor held the days warm. The fan hummed. The hum sanded the edges of my thoughts. Bill called again, voice like gravel in a sack. Joe, I've got 12:30 at the title office. Bring your ID and whatever deed copies you've got. I'll have the cashier's check. If we move clean, we can pass keys before dinner. You sure? He asked not to test me, just the way a man asks if the board you're about to cut is the right one. I'm sure. Then sleep, he said. You'll need your eyes. After he hung up, I opened the blue folder. Paper has a warm feel when it's been held. Names, dates. That land number only a county cares about. And I could recite it like a hymn. I closed the folder and rested my palm on top. Outside, the rain stopped for good. The shop deepened into a quiet you can taste wood, oil, old coffee, a faint line of soap from the mug. I clicked off the shop light and let the street glow make its gray ladders on the floorboards. I watched one ladder shift, slow as breath. My phone blinked. Mike. A breakfast I couldn't name, a little metal kettle on a burner, a city waking up in blue glass. You up? Got your message. You okay? I'm fine. Workday tomorrow. Proud of you. I wrote. I held his picture close a second longer than I needed, as if heat could pass through a screen. I put the phone face down. Above me, 2 long watermarks from a storm, 3 springs back, ran like rivers on the ceiling. I had told myself I'd fix them. Maybe I still would. Maybe someone else would. The fan hummed. My eyes closed. Somewhere in the wall, heat clicked and settled. Morning would come. Paper would get signed. Keys would change hands. None of it would be loud. Morning came gray and thin, the kind of light that makes dust look like fog. I washed my face at the shop sink. The water ran cold first, then caught a little heat and smelled like old pipes. I combed my hair with my fingers, dried my hands on a shop rag, and set my wallet on the bench license halfway out, ready. The blue folder lay there like a loaf, just out of the oven. Paper holds warmth when someone's hands have been on it. On the cot, I folded the army blanket tight, corners sharp. The kettle hissed before it whistled. I cut the flame and poured. The mug was chipped on the lip. I turned it so the chip faced away and took 2 slow swallows. Outside, the alley ran shallow, brown, and quiet. A cat stepped from one dry spot to the next, proud of its feet. I drove slow downtown. Wipers worked their small seesaw, a click at each end. On South Campbell, I hit all 3 greens. A school bus breathed out a line of kids in bright rain jackets. A boy, small and serious, held a lunchbox to his chest like it was breakable. The title office sat in a low brick building between a nail place and a tax prep sign that still thought it was April. I parked in front, straightened my collar in the rear view, checked that the blue folder was under my arm, and went in. The lobby smelled like coffee and clean carpet. A television in the corner ran the weather without sound. A young couple sat shoulder to shoulder with a sleeping baby in a stroller. The woman's hair was damp at the ends. The man kept squeezing her knee, his thumb moving in a circle. A small bell chimed when the inner door opened, and a woman in a cardigan said, "Mr. Parker?" She said it like she'd said that name 1,000 times, and none of them were me. I followed her to a long table. The chain pen lay there in a neat loop, the kind that wants to curl back into itself after you pull it straight. A yellow sticky sat on her keyboard. Transfer. Today. Plain as a grocery list. Bill came in from the side door in a jacket that didn't care about rain. He smelled faintly of cigarettes, even this early, and peppermint to hide it. He set a cashier's check on the table like a plate you don't want to spill. His eyes were red at the rims but steady. The closer slid a stack in front of me. ID, she said, and smiled the corner of a smile. I set my license down. The chain pen scraped across one paper, then another. Names. Dates. A place for a signature that still looked like mine. When the woman typed, the keyboard sounded like a small animal walking on tile. The printer coughed and shook out a new page. Air conditioning hummed overhead. The door behind me opened and let in rain smell. Heavier footsteps. The closer glanced up, then down. A camera phone made that soft little chirp it makes when someone forgets to silence it. I didn't turn. You can feel a phone pointed at your back the way you can feel a dog staring at the last bite in your hand. Owner of record, Mr. Joseph Parker, the closer said, steady, reading from her screen. Transfer scheduled for today. Her voice was just office, calm, nothing added, and still the words went through me like a new nail driven true. I felt the little tremor of the table where the chain pen hit one link and stuttered. From the lobby, the baby made a hiccup noise and then slept harder. The closer slid the last page to me and tapped where she wanted my hand to go. Here, she said. I signed. She lifted the top sheet, blew gently on the ink out of habit, and added a pink flag tab. Bill's pen clicked, 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 then gave up and wrote, He slid me a small envelope with a receipt and a copy, and his keys, the ones I'd handed him earlier, made their own answer when they hit the table. A low, solid ring. "Mailing address for notices?" she asked. I gave her Karen's, plain, in the same voice I'd used to order a sandwich. She wrote it down. "We'll send change of ownership and occupancy today," she said, and her pen underlined the date like a teacher. Bill stood, leaned in. His voice stayed under his breath. "You want me to be the one to talk on the porch, Joe?" "No," I said. "Paper can talk." My palm sat flat on the blue folder. It was warm again. On the way out, I passed the young couple. The woman smiled at me without knowing why. The way people do when they think you might be on their side of luck. The man jiggled the stroller to keep the baby asleep. Rain ticked on the windows. The television showed a sun for tomorrow. Outside, the air felt rinsed. The rain had stepped away enough that you could hear the street more than you could hear the sky. I stood under the awning and watched the parking lot shine. The bell chimed behind me. The phone in my pocket buzzed. "We're bringing the truck at 5. Please don't be difficult." Then another. "Mike's fine. He won't mind." Mike's text chimed over hers blurred train window. Foreign signs. "All good. Back next week. He wasn't in this room." Bill lit a cigarette at the far end of the awning, turned his head a little, blew the smoke where it wouldn't find me. He lifted his chin once. "We good?" And I lifted mine back. "We're good." He went to his car with the slow walk of a man who has made his peace with his knees. I put the receipt in my wallet and the envelope under my arm and walked to my truck. On the seat, the sticky note I'd written last night looked like it had always been there. "Transfer. Today." The letters had bled a little where my thumb had been wet. I set the blue folder on top of it and started the engine. The fan pushed warm, dusty air from the vents. A song I didn't know came on low from some old station and sounded like a road I had driven once and could find again without thinking. I drove back down Campbell, turned onto Maple, and let the tires whisper into my own block. The new lock on the porch flashed at me like a tooth. The rain had eased to a fine mist that made everything shine. My porch steps looked slick as a fish. The doormat, welcome rubbed thin, held 3 wet boot prints that weren't mine. The trash bags were gone. On the porch rail, a line of water hung heavy and didn't fall. I parked at the curb and sat for a second with the engine off, listening to the street instead of my head. The maple above me dripped in a slow count. 1, 2, and a longer wait, like it was thinking. Mr. Reed stood by his can with a cigarette he didn't light. He lifted 2 fingers. I lifted 2 back. He looked past me to the house, and then at his shoes. From the far end of the block came the low-throat sound of a truck too big for our small street. I didn't carry anything up. I just took the blue folder and the little envelope from the title office and walked to the mailbox. The hinge creaked on its old pin, a sound I knew the weight of. Inside, the space was empty except for a coupon pack thick as a glove. I pulled it, set it on the rail, and slid the small envelope in. It looked like nothing, a soft yellow, a printed window, a stamp that matched the others stacked in the office downtown. The truck turned onto Maple, rattling the puddles. White box, rental logo half peeled, a hand out the window to check the rain. Patrick drove. I recognized the cap. Karen sat next to him with a clipboard. She smiled wide as if a camera were pointed at her. The truck coughed once and idled hard. She hopped down in clean sneakers and looked at my hands, then my face, then the box taped into the middle of the porch where the door used to be only a door. "What are you doing here?" she asked, sweet as a receptionist. "We told you 5. I looked past her at the basil. The beads on the leaves had shrunk. The scent lifted a little in the damp. I kept my voice level so it wouldn't add to the weather. Checking my mail. The mail slot in the door had a small stack lodged behind the new lock plate. I could see the white edges through the gap, where the screws didn't sit quite flush. Patrick came up with the dolly and stood 1 step down from me, the way a man does when he's ready to go forward or back depending on how the air turns. A sedan pulled in behind my truck. Bill stepped out in his jacket and left the engine running. He didn't come past the sidewalk. He didn't need to. In his hand was another yellow envelope, thicker, and a set of keys that were not going to be mine again. He checked the address on the envelope like a man who reads things twice, and then looked at me. I nodded once. He didn't raise his voice. "Take what's yours," Bill said from the sidewalk, small as a pocket knife. I pressed the thumb latch I'd fixed years ago on the narrow window to the left of the door. It still knew my hand. The old catch lifted with a soft pop. I reached in 2 fingers and eased the frame off its nail, the photo of Linda with flour on her cheek from the year we thought homemade rolls could fix Christmas. I had hung it low so the afternoon light would hit it warm. The picture slid against the glass and caught my sleeve with its corner. I wrapped it in my jacket and brought it back out into the mist. Bill walked to the mailbox, slid the thicker yellow envelope in under the one I had placed, and flipped the little red flag up. The flag made a small, stubborn click. Everyone heard it. "You can't do this," Karen said, but she said it to the space between us, not to me. Her voice wanted to rise, and then didn't. From the corner, a cruiser rolled by slow. The officer in the passenger seat watched our faces the way a person watches clouds, trying to read what they'll do next. The car kept moving. Somewhere, a screen door banged. A dog barked once and decided that was enough. "You told us to find our own place," she said, steadier now, as if reading a line. "We found one." "You found mine," I said. The words weren't angry. They were a measurement. Like putting a tape to a board and saying what it is. Patrick bent down, adjusted the dolly strap, then stood up again without moving. He watched the red flag. The basil let go 1 drop. It hit the stone and broke without a sound. I set the frame on the passenger seat of my truck and tucked the jacket around it so the glass wouldn't rattle. In the back, a coil of garden hose lay the way a sleeping snake does when it has no plans. I picked up my gloves from the floorboard, shook the sawdust out, and slid them into the door pocket. You keep the things you use. The rest finds its owner. When I turned to go, Karen reached toward the mailbox and stopped with her hand hovering over the red flag. It wobbled once. She swallowed. No words came. Patrick looked at the flag. Neither of them looked at me. From down the block, a church bell rang noon, iron, and rain together. I put my hand on the truck's roof. The metal felt cool and clean. I stood there, a heartbeat longer than I needed to, long enough to feel my own breath settle. Then I opened the door and got in. She pulled the yellow envelope from the mailbox, read the first line, and forgot the speech she'd practiced. Mist hung in the maple like breath that hadn't decided whether to leave. The street was a dull mirror. Tires drew gray lines that closed behind them. I stood by my truck and waited for the sound in my chest to stop arguing with the sound of the day. The red flag on the mailbox stood up like a small, polite hand. Karen stepped onto the porch with the clipboard tucked under her arm like a shield. She looked at the flag, then at me, then back at the flag. Patrick came slower, the dolly in one hand, the other hand hovering like he wanted to catch whatever might fall. The rental truck idled in a square cough. Diesel has a taste. It sits on your tongue the way a penny used to when you were a kid. She pulled the mailbox door. The hinge let out that old metal sigh. The first yellow slid free in her fingers. Her nail caught the corner and made a white scratch. She read the black letters with her mouth shut, then read them again with her jaw set. Vacate within 14 days. Return keys to the address below. The clipboard lowered a little, the way a shield drops when a person wants to see if the field is truly empty. Mr. Reed stood 2 yards off, pretending his unlit cigarette needed all his attention. When he heard 14 days, he folded the cigarette like a man putting away a tool. A sprinkler across the street clacked a half circle and stopped, then tried again and found its breath. The cruiser from earlier rolled slow past the corner and kept going when nothing bright happened. Patrick leaned toward her shoulder. "What is it?" he asked, quiet. She didn't answer him. She turned the envelope over to look for a friendlier side. There wasn't one. Paper said what paper says when it's ready. Who owned what now? Where to send keys? How much time to clear a house without breaking anything that mattered? No hard words. Plain ones. I'd used plain words my whole life. They last longer. I walked to the side gate and slipped through to the narrow strip of yard where the tools live. The fresh brass plate on the door caught what little light there was. The putty smear was still soft under the screws. I set my spade under my arm, reached up, and tugged the string on the little chime Linda hung years back. Tin leaves rang twice. The sound sat in the mist and then went thin. Basil still held beads. I pinched one leaf and rubbed it just enough to remind my fingers what fresh is. My chest did the small, quiet ache it does when a nail sets clean. Karen looked up. "You can't just—" She started and then stopped. The clipboard tapped her thigh once, a small metronome that had lost the count. She didn't come down the steps. She didn't need to. Paper had come for her. My phone buzzed. A photo from Mike. A gray train window. Foreign letters on a station sign, his face in the glass by accident. All good. Long ride. Back next week. I typed, "Be safe." He wasn't in this room, and I wouldn't drag him into it with a text. Bill stayed by the sidewalk like a man who understands that footprints matter. He didn't wave. He didn't grin. He was a detail in a day that would hold together without extra lines on it. "Dad," Karen said, steadying herself on my name, the way a person steadies on a railing when the boat shifts. "You told us to find our own place." "I did," I said. "Not here." Patrick shifted his weight. The dolly wheel squeaked and then shut up. Somewhere a dog decided it had more to say after all and barked twice. I set the spade in the truck bed beside the hose and a coil of twine. The twine smelled faintly of rain and tomatoes from years that had gone right. I took the frame of Linda out from the passenger seat and tucked it deeper in my jacket so the glass wouldn't rattle when the road got rough. The jacket held her the way a chest does when it isn't ready to say a thing out loud. At the mailbox, Karen's thumb left a damp print where she had held the flap. She looked at Patrick, and he looked at the red flag. She didn't ask me to take it down. The flag meant the same to all of us. I got in the truck. The seat was cool. My hands smelled like mint and wet wood. When I turned the key, the fan coughed out warm dust from last summer and laid it on my face like a small blanket. As I pulled away, the basil leaf I had pinched fell to the stone and lay there dark as a bruise. The rental truck idled, a question that would have to wait for an answer that didn't come from me. The alley behind the shop was shallow with brown water again. I parked where I always park, under the sign that has never lit up, and sat a moment to collect the quiet. The day had turned the color of paper that's been in a file longer than you remember. My phone lay face down on the bench. When I flipped it, a name I hadn't seen in months was already exactly where I needed it. "Arnie still buying buildings? Call me." I didn't type more. He knew my hands. He knew what a shop smells like when it's honest. I set the spade next to the workbench, took the blue folder out, and laid it flat. Heat from my fingers woke the plastic. The shop light hummed. On the far wall, a long watermark looked like two rivers deciding where to go. I picked up the phone and pressed Arnie's number. It rang once, twice, and then found him. "Parker," he said, voice a dry chuckle full of sawdust. "You still breathing?" "Breathing," I said. "You still buying?" Arnie's laugh came low and quick, the way men laugh who've sanded their knuckles down to good use. "Buying if it doesn't come with trouble," he said. I could hear the radio in his shop crackle, the staticky guitar that never quite finds the note. "No trouble," I said. "Building only. No claims, no strings. Just keys." "You at the old place on Lark?" he asked. "Still am," I said. "For now." "Come by," he said. "Or I come to you." I've got time and a pen that writes, even when it's cold. We met halfway. His pickup smelled like coffee and motor oil, and the kind of leather that's been sat on by a line of men who didn't talk more than they worked. He stepped out with a manila folder under his arm and looked at my shop the way a man looks at a fence post. Up, down, twice, measuring by eye. His hair has gone white where it used to argue with the wind. His hands were the same square, nicked, ready. "You built that rail for my sister's stair," he said, as if to remind us both why we trusted each other. "It still doesn't splinter." "I told you it wouldn't," I said. We walked the length of the wall. The cinder block held last winter's dust. When you brushed it, it put a gray line on your skin that didn't want to leave. Inside, The fan over the bench clicked its one tired click every third turn. The tape measure on the pegboard hung a half-inch off its nail, and had been like that for months. Arnie looked up. "Roof's honest," he said. "Floor knows stories." He rapped his knuckles once. "What do you want me to say, Joe?" "I'll take it and not kill it." "That'll do," I said. He opened the folder, took out a page, the kind with lines that have seen hands. No heavy words. A number. A date. A promise to bring a cashier's check to the same desk that had seen my name this morning. "Close by Friday?" he asked. "Friday works," I said. "I'll be somewhere else by then." He didn't ask where. He didn't need to. Old friends don't parade your plans back to you. They put a pin in them and move to the next step. We stood in the door and let the air move past us. From the bar on the corner came the soft fry smell of burgers starting the lunch shift. A delivery truck breathed out and backed up to a loading dock with long, patient beeps. Two high school boys with wet hair walked by in hoodies and argued softly about a game. One of them glanced in, saw planes and clamps and the old drill press, and his face did that thing a face does when it remembers it has hands. Arnie signed, the pen scratching like a small animal working. I signed under him. He folded the page into his folder like you fold an apron when the day is good enough to stop. He pulled a cardboard square from the cab, uncapped a marker that smelled like a headache, and looked at me. "Post it," I said. "You've got my say until Friday." He wrote in block letters, "Closed for renovation." The ink bled a little in the damp. He taped it inside the glass. Patrick's car rolled to the mouth of the alley and stopped. His cap showed first. He stayed in the car a beat, and then got out like a man who isn't sure he should. Karen sat, arms folded hard, her face turned toward the windshield like the glass could testify for her. Patrick came close enough to smell the rain on his polyester, then stopped when he hit the shop's shadow. "This is family," he said, looking past me into the light and the sawdust, like he could claim it by naming it. "It's a building," I said. "The work was family. The work goes where the hands are." He nodded like he understood the grammar, even if he didn't like the sentence. Karen didn't get out. She didn't need to. The alley didn't care about a new witness. Inside, I took my three things. The old hand plane with my palm worn into the handle. The small tin of screws that had lived on the bench since Mike was 10 and wanted to help. And the photo of the first sign I ever painted. Parker Woodwork. Letters a little too proud. I wrapped the plane in a shop rag that smelled like oil and soap. The rag left a stripe on my thumb I didn't bother to rub away. Arnie set a little metal key on the bench. "For now," he said. "Until Friday. Use it if you need 5 minutes." "I won't need more than 2, I said. We stepped outside. The alley felt like a throat that had just cleared. A jay in the sycamore shouted something rude and bright, and then flew off as if embarrassed by itself. The cloud cover had pulled thin. Light laid itself on the brick in long, pale squares. Arnie climbed into his truck. "Bring the blue folder," he said. "Same desk at 12 tomorrow. We'll make it simple." "Simple is good," I said. He pulled away, the sound of his engine a steady, ordinary promise. Patrick's car moved after him, slower, like it had to think about each foot of road. I turned the shop light off and let the space hold what it wanted. I touched the door once, flat palm, like saying goodbye the way men say it to things that don't say it back. The sign on the glass looked calm. It didn't raise its voice. It didn't have to. Paper had already spoken twice today. I slid the hand plane onto the truck seat beside Linda's picture and the spade. The three of them made a small, quiet company. The fan inside the shop clicked its third click and stopped. I sat a second with my hands on the wheel and watched a drop crawl down the windshield, slow as a feeling you don't want to name yet. Then I started the engine. Afternoon thinned into a kind of light that makes every edge honest. I parked in my usual spot under the sign that never lit and let the engine tick itself quiet. The shop breathed like a dog that knows you're leaving for a while, watchful, not begging. I unlocked the door with the same turn I've made 1,000 mornings and set the blue folder on the bench where my hand lands without thinking. I made a list on a torn flap of a box. Plain, picture, spade, big letters, simple as a grocery run. I tucked the flap into the folder like a child's drawing you don't want to crease. The fan over the bench gave its one tired click every third turn, and then behaved. Glue smell held at the edges like it knew its place. I walked the room, touching what I wasn't taking. The drill press with the belt I'd tightened with Mike's small fingers pressed under mine. The jar of washers Linda labeled in a hand that never hurried. The pegboard ghost of a saw I'd loaned and never missed. I brushed my knuckles along the cinder block and left a gray line like the ones old maps used to show a river that moved. I stepped back outside and crossed to the diner on Glenstone. Inside smelled like coffee that had been ready since dawn, and pie that had a decision to make about sugar. I took the corner booth where no one sits long. The waitress set down a mug without asking. Some people read a face like a weather report. The mug was heavy and chipped. I turned the chip away from my mouth and took 2 slow swallows. Grease hissed at the grill. A fork clicked against a plate. A man laughed once and then cleared his throat like he'd said too much. I took out my phone and scrolled to Alice. She picks up on the second ring the way sisters do who grow herbs on their windowsills and hang peppers to dry like jewelry. "You on the road?" she asked. Her voice carried dry heat even through a line. "Not yet," I said. "Soon." "There's a room," she said. "You know which one." "I know." "Bring the spade," she added. "Peppers need a stubborn hand." "And the picture." "The one with the flower." "I've got them," I said. "We didn't say I'm sorry or what happened. We have a way of putting the right boards in the right place without naming the hammer." She told me about a storm in Santa Fe that never quite found itself and a man at the co-op who complained about peppers being too red. I listened because it's a thing you do when you mean to keep going. Back at the shop, I opened the little window over the sink so the glue and the diner coffee could argue with each other. I slid the handplane into a rag and wrapped it twice. The wood handle knew my palm even through cloth warm, as if it had waited for the weight. I set Linda's picture against the passenger seat and tucked the jacket around it so the glass wouldn't rattle when the road shrugged. The spade went in the bed, metal ringing once against the truck like a small bell that found its note. The phone buzzed. A message from Bill. "Tomorrow, 12. Same desk." Under it, a dot of rain on my screen. I wiped with my sleeve. A message from Arnie followed like a man who doesn't step on a heel. "Brought a decent lock. See you there." I wrote back. "Good." Toward evening, I drove past Maple. The rental truck sat at the curb with a door open like a mouth that hadn't decided whether to eat. The red flag stayed up polite, stubborn. Patrick looked at it and then at the clipboard and then at Karen. She read and reread the same line the way a person remeasures a board she already cut. Mr. Reed touched his temple with 2 fingers and looked away. I didn't stop. I let the block slide in my mirror until it was only rain on glass. Back in the alley, the neon beer sign at the corner bar stuttered itself into a steady glow. Someone inside cheered at a game and then apologized to no one. I turned off the shop light and stood in the doorway with my palm flat against the wood. I did not say goodbye. I don't say it to rooms. I say it to people. On the cot, I pulled the army blanket up and let the fan make its low circle. The night settled on the roof in small, even hands. My phone lit once with Mike, a blurred station, a paper cup of tea, his face in a window he didn't mean to catch. All good. Back next week. I typed, "Proud of you." I meant it. The screen cooled. The room held. Sleep came like a steady truck going by. First the sound, then the wait, then the quiet after. Morning walked in before the sun decided to show itself. I washed my face in the cold stream that always starts stubborn, and then remembers it can be warm. I folded the blanket tight, corners true, and checked the blue folder like you check your pockets before you leave a house that isn't yours anymore. South Campbell gave me 2 greens and 1 Mercy yellow. The title office sat between the nail place and the tax sign that still believed it was April. Inside smelled like coffee and carpet again. The television showed a weatherman drawing a sun over a map with a smile he might have used at a wedding. A man with a hat held his hat like it might bolt. "Mr. Parker?" the cardigan said. Same voice, same small bell when the door opened. I followed her to the same long table. The chain pen lay in its neat loop, glad to be pulled straight. She clipped our IDs to the file and slid the originals back. corners aligned. The sticky on her keyboard read, "Transfer today," in a different hand. Beneath it someone had written, "Friday close," in smaller letters, as if the word needed room to grow. Bill was just leaving another closing. He lifted his coffee, a small salute, and let the door hush behind him. Arnie came in with his manila folder under his arm and rain on his shoulders that didn't stick. He set the folder down and nodded once like a man counting fence posts. "ID?" the closer said, like a ritual that keeps a roof on. We set down what we had. She slid paper. The chain pen made its small animal sound. Seller. Parker. Buyer. Miller. Names look different when they sit that close. The printer coughed. Air hummed. A fly tapped the window and then decided to be somewhere else. "Close Friday at noon," she said. "Keys pass then." She underlined the date with her pen. The line was straight and sure. She has a hand that trusts itself. "Good," Arnie said. "I'll bring the cashier's check Friday." "I brought a lock for her in the meantime," he added. "Post it," I said. "You've got my say until Friday. Owner on record till then." He smiled without showing teeth. We signed where a pink flag told our hands where to be. She blew lightly on the ink like wanting not to rush is the same as being careful. She handed me a receipt and a copy. The envelope felt warm from all the hands. When we stepped back out under the awning, the street had the clean smell that comes after a night that made up its mind to stop raining. Arnie tucked the folder under his jacket, the way a man shields kindling. We walked to our trucks without ceremony. Business done right rarely asks for more. At the shop, Arnie set the new lock in the door with the attention of a man buttoning a child's coat. Firm, simple, no fuss. The screwdriver bit gripped and turned, wood answering wood. He wiped the brass with his sleeve and left one small circle clean in the dull. Inside, he taped closed for renovation straighter, one more press along the top edge until it made the sound of adhesive choosing. Patrick's car rolled past the alley mouth, slowed, and read the sign. He swallowed once and kept the car rolling. A jay on the sycamore said a bright, rude word, and then seemed to regret it. I took the hand plane from the passenger seat and set it back long enough to run my palm along its handle. The groove fit me the way a good staircase fits your feet in the dark. Without looking, I set it beside Linda's picture, and the spade the three of them with room between like guests who understand each other without talking across the table. My phone buzzed once. Alice. "Sun's out. Peppers look like bells. Room's ready." I wrote soon. The word looked small and right. Santa Fe felt closer than the map said room peppers. A bench that wasn't mine yet. Arnie locked the door and tested the handle. It didn't rattle. He handed me a spare key for the days between, and kept one like a man who knows he'll be back with a receipt in a pocket and a story about traffic. "Friday," he said. "Friday," I said. We stood there a moment and let the alley be a throat that had cleared. The neon beer sign at the corner didn't stutter. Somewhere, a grill top hissed and turned meat into lunch. Somewhere else, a bell marked an hour. I didn't need to know, because the day was already telling me what it wanted. I slipped the spare key into the blue folder and closed it with my palm until the plastic warmed. Paper would carry the rest. Santa Fe felt closer than the map said. Banks have their own weather-cool air, soft carpet, a smell like paper that never sweats. I stood in line behind a woman with a baby on her shoulder, and a man counting out 20s into a small pile he didn't want to look at. The teller glass made everyone's voice a size smaller. I held the blue folder under my arm like a book you don't read in public. When it was my turn, the teller smiled in a way that said she had seen 100 mornings like this, and some of them went fine. Her nails were short and neat. The little sign at her window said Laura in a clear hand. "How can I help you?" she asked. "I need a cashier's check," I said. "Made out to Michael Parker." I spoke my son's name the way you test a rafter lightly, but listening for any give. "Amount?" she asked. I told her. "Plain, no flourishes," she typed, nodding once as if the numbers were a weather report that would make sense later. She slid a slip through the slot. I signed where she had me put my hand. The pen rattled against the glass when I set it down. While she worked, I watched dust fall through the shaft of light by the window. Outside, a bus sighed, and a boy in a red hoodie put a quarter into the newspaper box and let the door snap when he took one paper. I could almost smell the ink. Laura lifted her eyes once like a person listening to a kettle in the next room. She fed the printer. It coughed once and gave us a clean sheet with my son's name printed where it needed to live. She slid the check to me under the glass, not with ceremony, just with care. The man with the 20s glanced at the name on my check, then at me, and looked down like he'd stepped someplace clean. I looked at the name and let the letters settle. My chest did that small, quiet ache it does when a nail sets true. "Would you like an envelope?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "and a note card." She nodded and set both through. I wrote on the card the way I write measurements on wood, slow enough to be right the first time. "For your place." No strings. "Dad." I put the card in with the check and pressed the flap. The glue tacked with a small sweetness. I held the envelope to my chest the way men used to press a hat to their chest when a song ended. My phone buzzed. A picture from Mike night out a train window, a smear of lights along a river I couldn't name, his reflection by accident again. All okay. Back next week. Time moved differently where he was. Even the dark had a different angle. I took a photo of the envelope on the counter, my hands in the frame, the blue folder, the pen with the bank's name. I sent it to him with 3 words. "This is yours." He sent back a heart that looked smaller than it meant to, and then the little thumbs up because he is his mother's son and doesn't waste words. Laura asked if I needed anything else. I thought about saying a road that doesn't double back. I said, "Number, thank you." She clipped my receipt to a copy and slid my license back with the corners aligned. Good hands. I walked outside into a morning that had decided to be bright after all. The light on the hood of my truck made a clean stripe. I stood there a second with the envelope in my hand, and then put it deep in the blue folder and closed my palm over the plastic until it warmed. A church bell marked the hour in iron. I nodded to it like a neighbor. At the station on Chestnut, the counter smelled like bleach and coffee and the metal taste that lives in air where big engines wait. I asked for a ticket to Santa Fe. The woman behind the glass printed the paper and slid it to me without looking up from her list. I folded the ticket once and put it in the blue folder with the post-counter slip from Mike's envelope, the receipt I didn't need, and the torn box flap that still read plain, picture, Spade. Back at the shop, I set the envelope from Mike on the bench and stood with my hands on either side of it. I didn't pray over it. I don't bargain. I just breathed out long enough to feel the air leave. The glue on the flap had a sweet edge I could taste when I forgot and licked my thumb. By noon, the alley had found its dry. I ate a sandwich over the trash can and brushed the crumbs off the workbench with the edge of my hand. The hand plane sat where I'd left it, quiet as a dog waiting to be told a thing it already knew. I picked it up once, set it down again. The day had a direction, and I didn't want to put another bend in it. Toward evening, I walked the envelope to the post counter in the drugstore and paid the woman there to put the right stamps and stickers on it so it would not wander. She wrote numbers on a slip I would not need, and I took it anyway and folded it into the blue folder by habit. When I came back out, the light had softened, and the smell from the fryer at the corner bar was all salt and pepper and a little burn. The sign above the shop didn't flicker. It isn't that kind of sign. On my cot that night, the army blanket lay flat. The fan did its slow circle. My phone lit with, "Thank you, Dad," while I was brushing my teeth at the shop sink. I set it face down on the towel so the light wouldn't talk too long. I lay there and counted the clicks in the wall where the heat hides and felt each one step down. Morning would take me to a bus. Paper would carry the rest. The bus station sat with its back to a cut of sky the color of a dime. I got there early because I like to watch a place breathe before I ask it for anything. The benches were hard plastic that had learned the shape of waiting. A man in a cowboy hat slept with his chin on his chest. A girl with a purple backpack scrolled her phone with her thumbs moving quick as sewing. The loudspeaker said 3 cities I wasn't going to and then coughed and said mine. I checked the blue folder for the 4th time, the post-counter slip from Mike's envelope, the receipt I didn't need, the ticket with Santa Fe typed in a strong black. The edge of the paper had a softness already, like it had rubbed against another life on its way to mine. At the curb, the bus exhaled and took a breath. The driver wore a jacket with a shiny stripe and looked at people's hands more than their faces. "Checked bag?" he asked. "I've got a spade wrapped up," I said. "It's for a garden, not trouble." He grinned with only one side of his mouth. "Garden's the opposite of trouble," he said. He took the bundle and slid it into the belly of the bus with a hollow thump. I kept the handplane in my tote and the picture of Linda in my jacket. You carry what breaks if it gets too far away from you. The waiting room smelled like coffee pulled thin and the lemon they put in a bucket when they mop. A vending machine hummed and offered an orange soda that remembered its own childhood. I bought a small black coffee anyway and held it between my hands like a warm animal. It tasted like paper and the promise of heat. I called Alice. She picked up like she'd been standing by the phone. "You started?" she asked. "Ticket in hand." "Bus snacks?" "Coffee." "Bring your stubborn," she said. "I've got a patch of dirt that thinks it's rock." "Sounds like we'll get along," I said. I listened to her house in the small pauses, the clink of a cup, the soft slide of a chair on tile, a wind that didn't have water in it. You can tell where a place is by its wind. The loudspeaker said Amarillo, said Santa Rosa, said Santa Fe. The shop would close without me. At noon Friday, papers were set. Arnie had the key. The driver took my ticket with 2 fingers and tore it cleanly. I stepped up into the aisle and found a seat by the window. The upholstery was dark blue with little constellations stitched in stars that don't know where to go, so they stay and make a pattern anyway. I slid the handplane under the seat, wrapped in the rag. I kept the picture with me, face to cloth. The bus pulled, heavy and sure, and the station door made that sound a door makes when it surrenders. Springfield slid back tires, stores, thrift piles, the brick school that smells like pencil shavings and gym floors even from the road. The sky lifted. The road gathered itself and laid straight lines west. We crossed the edge of town where car lots thin and grain silos appear like big, quiet people staring at the same spot. The bus settled into a rhythm engine, road, breath. A boy across the aisle ate chips one at a time and turned each one into a small prayer for salt. A woman 2 rows up read a library book with the plastic cover that makes its own small weather when you turn a page. I took a photo of the sun in the window as it moved down the aisle of the bus, making rectangles on knees and bags and a sleeping hat. We stopped in Joplin and again somewhere with a restroom that smelled like bleach and a kind of loneliness that gets under the tile. I stretched my back and bought a pack of peanuts I didn't want. The driver counted heads, and we climbed back into the same seats like a class trip that knows its row. Night came fast once the fields had nothing left to say. The sky went the color of old denim, and then darker. The windows turned into mirrors, and I watched my face ride with me, older than I remember and less sorry than I expected. A boy in the back laughed too loud at something in his headphones, and then remembered himself. The road kept beating like a thing that means it. I opened the jacket a little and looked at Linda's picture by the dome light. The flower on her cheek in the frame was a bright, clean mark, like chalk on a school board when the teacher writes your name without scolding. I tucked her back, buttoned the jacket, and leaned my head against the glass. It was cold on the bone. Somewhere past midnight, the bus stopped at a place with a machine that made hot water if you asked, and a shelf of cakes under a plastic lid. I did not ask. I stepped outside and let the night speak in crickets in a far train. I could taste dust and diesel, and the hint of someone's orange peel. When we started again, I slept in stitches 20 minutes, a turn, 10 more. And every time I opened my eyes, there was less of Missouri and more of what I hadn't seen in a long time. Dawn climbed under the bus like a mechanic with a flashlight. The sky turned the color of milk before coffee, and then found a thin line of gold. Texas Panhandle spread out flat enough to lay a map on it. We rolled past windmills that turned slow as if they were thinking about it. The road read its own straight sentence. I believed it. At a stop near Amarillo, a man sold coffee from a window and called everybody buddy in a voice that wanted to get us fed and gone. The steam lifted and blew sideways. I held my cup with both hands and let the heat talk to my bones. A woman near the door held a small dog under her sweater, like it was a pocket the sweater had grown just for this morning. The bus door breathed open and shut and open. We climbed back in. I took a photo of the light making a thin ladder over the seat in front of me. Mike texted while the bus hummed. "Got your picture, Dad." Thank you. It came with a little city icon I didn't recognize, and a time that didn't match my watch. I typed, "You're set when you get back. Proud of you." He sent back the kind of face that is smile enough, and then the plane. He wasn't in this room. He didn't need to be. We crossed a line on the map you can't see on the ground, and the air thinned in a way that made my lungs straighten. The land lifted itself into long, careful shoulders. New Mexico put its sign up with a color that didn't apologize. The bus made a small, contented noise, as if even engines know when a road opens for them. A boy 3 rows up pressed his forehead to the glass and said, "To no one, it looks like Mars." His mother laughed under her breath. The driver smiled without turning around. I watched the shadow of the bus run along a fence and lose, then find us again at the culverts. The handplane under my seat rested where I had set it, its weight, a right weight. Linda's picture warmed against my jacket where my heart had been keeping it. We stopped in Santa Rosa long enough to stretch and smell the particular clean that comes from sun on old stucco. A man with a straw hat sold breakfast burritos out of a cooler and said, "Green or red?" Like he was offering 2 doors to the same room. I said green, because Alice had taught me years ago that red talks first but green tells the truth. Green woke my nose the good way sun, smoke, a little bite that remembers rain. It burned right and let my nose remember what spice is. Back on the bus, a little girl across the aisle drew a picture of a house with a triangle roof and 3 square windows, and put a person next to it holding a flower. She colored the flower purple. She did not label the house. She didn't have to. The road rose and fell in long breaths. Pinyon and juniper pushed up in patches and then thinned. The way hair thins on a man who doesn't care to hide it. The sky was a big clean shirt someone had laid out and not put on yet. The bus turned, climbed, and the sign finally said Santa Fe 42, the way a clock says a number you can use. I took one last photo of the aisle where the sun had drawn its small bright squares on knees and bags. I put the phone away. I pressed my palm to the blue folder through my jacket, feeling the soft edge of the ticket I had already half used, and the empty place where the envelope for Mike had been. Paper had done its job. It wasn't loud. It had carried what it was supposed to carry, and sat quiet after, like a good tool. When the bus eased into the station, the brakes told their long story and then shut up. The door opened, and the air that came in was dry and sure. It smelled like dust and heat and a slice of pine. My knees remembered I'd been sitting. I stood in the aisle until the row moved. People smiled. The way people smile when they're tired in a friendly place. I stepped down with the handplane in my tote and the jacket over my arm. The driver pulled the spade from the belly and handed it to me like it was a baton in a race that takes more than one runner. I thanked him. He nodded once and checked the next bag for a name. Across the lot, Alice lifted her hand. She didn't wave it high. She didn't need to. Behind her, a line of peppers hung under the eaves like bells waiting on a wind. I walked toward her and felt the ground say yes under my shoes. A small, firm yes you can only hear when you've been told no for a while. "Hungry?" she asked when we were close enough not to shout. "Green," I said. She laughed and put her hand on my shoulder. The touch was light and sure. We turned toward the car. Her car smelled like clean cotton and child house, even before a door. The sky pulled a little bluer just to show off. Alice drove without music, letting the road talk. Santa Fe kept its colors even under a thin cloud, adobe the shade of bread. Doors painted the blue you find in a bowl you like to hold. Her car smelled like clean cotton and chile. The peppers under her eaves clicked softly when the wind remembered them. Her house sat low and sure behind a gate that opened with a push from the hip. Gravel made a polite sound under our shoes. Inside, the cool met us the way shade meets a long day, no drama, just a hand to the forehead. The swamp cooler hummed, soft as a far bee. In the kitchen, a kettle with a stubby spout waited on a burner that had known these hands for years. "Room's made," she said. She didn't point. She didn't have to. Down the hall, a bed stood with a clean quilt and a window that knew where afternoon light likes to fall. On the dresser, she had set a plain clay cup for my keys and a square of paper with the Wi-Fi name I would not use. I put the handplane on the dresser Even without a bench, it looked like itself. The blue folder went under it. Plastic warming under my palm. The picture of Linda leaned against the lamp for now flower on her cheek, finding the one slant of sun that had come into the room. The quilt smelled faintly of soap and dry air. A lizard ticked somewhere on the stucco outside, all toes and patience. We unpacked like people who know you only really own what you touch. 2 bowls from the cupboard. A wooden spoon with a burn along the handle. That told a story I didn't need to hear to believe. She set a pot and pulled onions, garlic, a handful of green chiles from a paper bag. The stem ends stained the cutting board the way old maps take a mark and keep it. I washed cilantro and thought about nothing. That thinking where you watch water run and put a bunch in a jar and admire how a kitchen becomes a garden if you let it. Grocery man said the chiles were stubborn this week, she said, smiling like she enjoyed losing a small argument to a vegetable. The pot answered with a soft fry, when the onions met the oil. The smell rose sweet, then sharp, green, then smoke. I leaned over the steam and let it find my eyes and make them tell the truth. Neighbors lived their lives in regular sounds. A screen door bounced and settled. Somewhere a radio tried a song and gave up. A child's laugh made a shape and then ran. I stood at the sink and watched a man across the narrow street carry a ladder, his boy carrying the shorter end like a solemn job that had been explained carefully. There is kindness in a ladder when 2 people hold it and neither tries to do more than his weight. The patch out back is yours, Alice said, nodding toward the small yard where dry earth held its breath under a trellis. It thinks it's rock. You 2 will get along. I brought a spade for the conversation, I said. We ate at the small table under the window. The light had turned the color of the clay. The stew burned the good way truth first, and then warmth. A spoon scraped the bottom of the bowl with small, honest clicks. She poured water from a pitcher that made its own music when it found glass. We didn't say what happened. We didn't assign blame. We let heat do what it does when it has a job and a vessel. My phone buzzed and I turned it over. A text from Arnie. Friday still noon. Bring only your hand. We'll give you a receipt. Another from Bill. Brief as a nod. House notices posted. Mail went. I typed, good to both. Paper was walking on its own legs now. It didn't need me to raise a voice to cross a room. We stood in the doorway after dishes, cups turned upside down to dry like small tents on the rack. Evening pulled a little orange from the last of the sky. A moth tried the porch light and failed to attach itself to anything. I touched the hand plane where it sat on the dresser and felt my palm recognize its own history. The blue folder under it seemed smaller for the first time in a long time. Alice set something on the table, a half sheet of paper she had torn from a bulletin board. Community wood shop, up on Cirillo's, she said. They need a pair of hands on Saturdays. Kids, and whoever else. If you want to see what a bench looks like when someone else paid for it. The flyer didn't shout. It listed hours and a number under a line that said, "We fix more than shelves here." I set it under the mug where steam had left a ring so it wouldn't warp. The swamp cooler gave its soft hum like agreement. I went to the back and stood at the edge of the patch. The dirt looked like the back of an old man's hand cracked where it wanted to fold. Pale where it remembered sun. Veins of darker running under. I pressed my boot heel in and felt the top give and the bottom refuse. I liked it for that. The hose coughed twice and then found its stream. The first wet hit the dust and lifted an animal smell, clean and old. A line of ants adjusted without complaint and kept at their work. The phone lit in my pocket. Karen's name stamped itself across the screen. And below it, the first words of a thing about family. And how could you? I let the water talk louder. The droplets stitched small silver onto the brown. The hose in my hand was a simple tool that did its job without thought. That counted for something. Across the street, the ladder crew looked over and lifted a hand, the kind of hello a town gives when it decides you belong. Inside, Alice set a kettle on and reached for 2 clay cups that had been cool all day. The peppers clicked. The night decided to be kind. Morning here didn't smell like rain, even when the world was damp. It smelled like sun getting ready and coffee getting honest. I carried the spade to the patch, and set the heel of my boot on its shoulder. The handle bit my palm the way a handshake should, firm, familiar. The soil resisted with a small, dry groan, and then gave in a slice at a time. You win land by inches. A neighborhood woke around me. A man jogged past with a dog who knew how to run without dragging. Two girls on bikes argued gently about whose turn it was to lead. Someone down the block shook a rug. The dust went up and came down in the same place. A rooster from nowhere insisted on being from here. The peppers under the eaves clicked once and went still. I made rows with the spade and the edge of a board Alice brought out. We set out starts basil for me because I like the way its smell makes a morning choose its heart, tomatoes because hope comes in clusters, two child plants because I was in a place that expected a man to respect the basics. The dirt under the top crust held cool like a secret that wasn't meant to stay one. My knees told me the truth about 65, and I said all right to them and kept going. We watered slow. The hose laid small circles of dark like coins finding a palm. The sound of water on dry ground is the sound of a promise made without your mouth. Alice stood with her hands on her hips and squinted at the trellis the way you look at a problem that can be solved by string and attention. She tied a line where the shade would not be stingy. The knot held like it had been taut. Inside, the kettle found its pitch. We sat on the low wall with clay cups that made heat feel heavier. Coffee here tasted like the same thing as elsewhere. And also not. It took on air. It stopped trying to be a city. My phone buzzed against the pocket seam. An email from the title office, as plain as bread. Your presence is not required for funding. Bring ID Friday for keys receipt. Under it, Arnie's thumb-length text. We're set. Papers in the chute. I brought donuts into the office, because that's what you do when you take a thing that mattered to a man. I smiled without letting it show. Courtesy is a kind of glue you don't see until it holds a day together. Another buzz. A message from Karen, long enough to need a fold on the screen. Words about betrayal, and after all we did, and a line that had Mike in it like a token you toss to a meter that's already read. I read the first pieces and put the phone face down on the wall. Noise is quick. Water is slower, and it stays. Under the phone, the clay felt warm. Above it, the sky stayed itself. The hose hissed. You can hear your own pulse when you stop helping the noise. Across the street, a woman clipped clothespins on shirts that would dry stiff and clean. She hummed a piece of a church song without pushing the words. A boy tried a skateboard trick 3 times and got it the 4th. He let himself grin and then stifled it, embarrassed to enjoy his own success. A truck brought lumber for a fence and set it down like setting down a sleeping child. Community shop meets tonight to set the week, Alice said, casual as salt. We can go and you can stare at a bench that's not yours. I can do more than stare, I said. We'll see, she said, not to doubt me, just to keep a day from bragging about itself. Toward evening, we wiped our hands on our old clothes and walked to a cinder block building painted a tan that tried to be friendly. The sign by the door was hand-lettered and straight. Inside, air carried pine and varnish, and the grin of 100 projects in different stages of becoming something. A woman with gray hair short, as good advice, checked names at a table and slid us 2 tags. She nodded at my hands and said, "You'll be fine." I watched a boy of 13 hold a board wrong and watched his shoulders admit it. I stepped in without making a speech and squared his stance with a touch at his elbow. Let the tool find flat, I said. Don't ask it to solve the whole afternoon. He pulled the plane, and the board gave that low ribbon sound that lets a man hear pride without tasting arrogance. He looked up with his mouth open like a question he didn't want to ask out loud. Again, I said. We moved through small fixes. A wobbly chair leg that only needed to know it was loved. A picture frame that wanted a corner to be the boss. A shelf that had been asked to be more than itself until we reminded it to be only itself and do that cleanly. The room made a quiet music sandpaper, soft laughter, the cough of a shop vac that doesn't fight hard. On the way home, the air slid cool along my neck. The peppers under our eaves were red like bells and gold like a sundae. The dirt at the patch had settled. Round dark halos marked where I'd asked for green. My phone chimed from the dresser. A photo from Mike, keys in his hand, A door behind him with new paint, and the number stenciled clean. Found a place. Thank you. The picture blurred his grin just enough to make it true. I put the phone face down again, and stood at the window, with Linda's picture leaned to catch the last light. The house breathed the way a good room does, when it is learning a new person. The swamp cooler hummed. The night stepped down one stair. Saturday gathered itself into shape before I decided what to call it. The community shop opened its door, with a push that practiced kindness. I signed my name under a column that didn't have volunteer written on it but meant it. The tag from last night went on my shirt pocket. A boy from the day before raised a hand, then put it down fast when he remembered he was allowed to just start. We set out tools. A plane found me without asking. A square appeared near my elbow, because someone with good sense had made sure squares were where they needed to live. I showed 3 different hands, 3 different answers to the same question, and all of them were right if they were careful. A woman in her 40s brought in a small table with a leg that leaned like a weary friend. We tightened the tenon with a shim, the thickness of a promise, and she ran her fingers along the edge like a person who remembers a name just in time. The smell was pine and patience. The sound was small burdens leaving one screw at a time, one burr taken down. One wobble persuaded into stillness. The light was the kind that doesn't brag about itself, but lets you see where you should put your hands. A teen with his hair shoved under a cap watched me set the blade and cleared his throat. My dad says I rush, he said, like a confession without the need for absolution. He's right, I said, and smiled so the truth wouldn't sting. Let the tool teach you slow. Slow sticks. He looked at his own fingers and nodded like he had found the end of some rope, and decided not to pull too hard yet. He pushed the plane. A ribbon lifted and curled and fell. A small, easy miracle every time. He laughed once under his breath and did it again. Sometimes work is a kind of prayer, even when you don't aim it at anything. At noon my phone vibrated. A message from the title office, 2 lines and a habit of underlining dates. Closed. Keys exchanged. Receipt. Ready. I showed Alice because a good witness keeps a day from slipping. Arnie's Dunn followed with a picture of the shop door, my door now wearing his lock and a new key shining like a tooth. He had set the sign closed for renovation straight and clean. A small knot somewhere in my chest loosened in one click. Paper finished what it started. Work kept the room from echoing. Another message arrived and I let it sit. Karen again, words piling up against words. The subject lines tried caps, and then tried sorrow, and then tried caps again. A car outside the shop honked twice at no one in a hurry. I put the phone back in my pocket and picked up the plane. Work continued, knowing only the board in front of it. When we closed for the day, we swept. The dustpan took what we asked. The floor gave back the good dull shine you see when a room has had a purpose fulfilled. The manager with the short gray hair set a tip jar out for pizza. A kid put in a quarter and looked proud without needing an audience. I wrote, "Thank you where names go," not because it needed saying, but because we should practice. On the walk home, the sky did that trick where pink hides behind blue and pretends to be shy. The smell from a food truck on a corner was cumin and char. A man took 2 plates to a table and a woman reached for one without asking which was hers. We passed a pair of tourists arguing softly over a map, each convinced of left, neither cruel about it. A bus sighed. A cyclist clicked a freewheel at a light. And waited. In the yard, the dirt around the starts had dried on top and kept its darker under. I pressed a finger in beside a child plant, and felt cool an inch down. Enough. The hose lay coiled like a sentence waiting for its verb. I left it for later. Alice sat on the low wall with a glass of water beaded cold. And we talked about nothing that required a verdict. Mike's message chimed again, lease signed. I start moving when I land. I owe you. I answered. You owe nobody. Just rest and build. He sent a photo of an empty room with a good window and a floor that had seen life but not too much of it. I took Linda's picture to the kitchen and set it on the counter where the late sun lands. Flour on her cheek caught the light like chalk. I wiped the counter with a dish towel and felt the small grid of a house becoming ours, pepper seeds, a bit of soil, the shadow of coffee. The kettle clicked and took heat and told us so. Tomorrow you'll water before breakfast, Alice said. It sets a day right. Paper's done, I said. Water can talk again. We ate green with eggs and tortillas that snapped and bent in the right places. The peppers under the eaves clicked, and for once it sounded like applause for no one in particular. Sleep came when it was ready. Morning put its hand on the yard and felt for a pulse. I walked out with the hose and let the spade lean against the wall like an old friend who doesn't need a chair. The water came out thin and then true. It stitched silver into the brown, and the brown answered by darkening the way a man answers by listening first. The basil lifted its head. The chill starts trembled once and decided to be brave. A neighbor watered 2 doors down. Her stream made a small rainbow that did not insist on being admired. A boy ran a plastic truck along the low wall and supplied the sound a truck should make. A runner slowed and then kept going, his breath convincing his feet. Somewhere a bell rang the hour, and for once it sounded lighter than iron. My phone lit with the effort of a long message. Karen again, her words trying every door they knew, anger, history, softness, borrowed for a minute and then dropped. A new line. You ruined the story we were telling. Family doesn't do that. I read the first sentences and put the phone face down on the wall where the clay held heat. Noise is quick. Water is slow and stays. The hose made its simple argument in a language I trusted. Another buzz, not a message, just a new email from the title office. Receipt attached. Keys past 12:03 p.m. I opened it and looked at the tidy numbers and the letters that made my name and Arnie's sit alongside each other like 2 men on a bench who know better than to talk over much. I saved the file and didn't print it. Paper had carried the river to the place it meant to go. It could rest. Alice stepped out with 2 small cups of coffee that smelled like a room coming awake. She handed me one and took the other, and we stood in the shade while Son practiced on the stucco. He texted, she said, meaning Mike. He lands in 2 days. Says to tell you he's fine. He is, I said, and meant it. The water found a root along the edge of a row and filled it without spilling. I pinched a basil leaf and rubbed it under my nose. The smell climbed up and made the day choose to be kind. Across the street, a couple loaded a small table into the back of a hatchback, each waiting for the other to find the right angle, neither rushing. The table went in without scraping. One of them laughed like a seatbelt clicking home. I set the hose down for a minute and pulled a weed that had decided it was brave. Its roots slid and then reconsidered. In the distance, a siren tried on a city mood and changed its mind before it reached us. The peppers under the eaves clicked statements too small to argue. The phone rang, not buzzed. A call, not a note. I let it go and watched the basil count its blessings 1 leaf at a time. The voicemail badge lit and then blinked again when a second call found the same decision. I rinsed dirt from my fingers in the stream and watched the water brown and then clear. The sound was ordinary metal, air, a pressure you can control with your wrist. Inside, the kettle set itself to remember heat. I took Linda's picture from the dresser and set it on the table by the window, where the light was honest. Flour on her cheek stayed bright. I took a photo of the picture on the table, the hose on the gravel, the shadow of the trellis trying to be a ladder. I sent it to Mike without words. A minute later he sent back a small green chile and a thumbs up. That was language enough. We ate eggs again because eggs forgive a man who forgets to shop. Green went on top because green tells the truth. After, I set the blue folder on the counter and lifted its cover. Inside, papers lay flat and behaved. I put a hand on them the way you put a hand on a sleeping child's shoulder, not to wake, only to prove the world's still there. By late morning, heat slid down into the yard and made the smell of wet dirt drift up like a good rumor. I wound the hose back into a circle and let it find its calm. The spade leaned without needing to be useful for a while. The lizard ticked along the wall like a tiny clock not interested in hours. The phone lit one more time. A shorter message from Karen, like a person standing far away. And finally using her inside voice. I don't know what to do now. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to win. I hadn't won. I'd stepped out and kept going. That was enough weight for one morning. Not because I wanted her to feel small, Because water speaks better than I do, and the ground was listening. I took a last photo, basil bright, Cheels small and sure. Alice's shadow cut by the trellis into friendly pieces. I put the phone in my pocket and let my hands be empty. The yard didn't cheer. It didn't need to. It just held what we asked it to hold and made room for more. Sometimes a new home is just the place where you can water the ground and the ground says yes. I stood there and watched the yes darken into the shape of roots I would never see. The peppers clicked. The day went on.